Hello, hi, I'm Zinfogel. Alright, the February 2022 Datamine has dropped, and we are going to talk about it before every single unit releases. What a concept! It's like there is a purpose to these videos. Anyway, today we'll be checking out the new Sync pairs, which include Palentine's Marnie, Palentine's Bea, Signasus Cyrus, and Signasus Dawn. There is also an event freebie with Blue and Arcanine, but I want to include him with the new Sync grids to compartmentalize things. Well then, let's get started. First up, we have Palentine's Marnie and Mega Mawile, a Steel-type seasonal tech. I am so tired of Galar seasonals, dude. Anyway, Marnie unfortunately continues a trend we predicted, where DNA is going to release a zone for every type. Marnie has a Steel Wish. We not only have to talk about her influence as a unit, but also how a Steel Zone improves the viability of the Steel type metagame, which bolsters Marnie's value. So, Marnie can Mega Evolve, and she is very interesting as a Mega Evolving Sync pair, because she is all about the entry passives. And if you are unaware, Mega Evolution activates entry passives again. Marnie's got Innate Terrify 2, Enfeeble 2, and Team Sharp Entry 1. This means she debuffs all enemies by -2 attack and -2 defense, while buffing the party's crit by +1 upon entering the field. Marnie packs the classic immediate debuffing utility I have learned to love in this game. Attack plus defense debuffs are amazing, because they neuter all enemies while making them squishier. Still weak stages in Champion Stadium focus on physical damage, and most Steel-type strikers are physical, which means Marnie plays perfectly in content she's meant to handle. Defense debuffs are particularly good for Kimono Grimsley. Marnie enhances Insult to Injury and Relentless without any setup. And she is the perfect partner for Gloria and Seishan. Together, they activate Steel, Galar, and Cook theme skills. That's plus 80 something attack. After Enfeeble and Steel Zone, Gloria's pre-sync damage becomes competitive for today's standards. As for Team Sharp Entry, coincidentally, most Steel-type strikers struggle to maximize crit. Marnie pairs really well with Hop. They combine buffs for a guaranteed +3 crit for the party. And Team Sharp Entry is enough to top off Grand Entry to Raihan. Marnie has excellent cohesion with her fellow Steel types, which is great, because her purpose is Steel Zone. But here is a fun part. Remember Mega Evolution procs entry passives again upon Mega Evolving. In reality, Marnie offers -4 attack and -4 defense by taking first sync. Add on top of that another Enfeeble one on her full grid for full defense debuffing, and Marnie ends up as a super convenient way of dropping stats. So, are you spending first sync solely for Marnie's debuffs? Not at all. Marnie's Sync Nuke is very potent. It's on par with Lear. We will get to that on Marnie's full grid, but she has one of those delete buttons first sync off type at 6-star EX potential. Mawile is Mega Evolution gives proportionate value for using it. And you want to know what's ridiculous? So far, we have only talked about Marnie's entry passives and her nuke. She packs a whole host of miscellaneous utility to contribute in battle. Marnie has solid stats, nothing outstanding, but she has a good offense and she can tank if you need her to. And Mega Mawile gains more attack and defense to improve its functions. Marnie's first move is Growl. It's a 1-bar spam for pure defensive utility. Growl debuffs all opponents' attack by -1. Marnie can fully nerf the enemy field's attack, so she can set up a pecking order and a power posture for other sync pairs, which she also happens to have on her own grid. Then there is Steel Wish. Much like Renegade Cynthia and Lucas, Marnie has rotation issues because she has to use Steel Wish to maximize her output. Marnie benefits from partaking in Steel Dual Strike, so somebody else can pump damage during Marnie's turns. Then we have Iron Head. It's the default Steel type offense move, which is both good and bad. It's good because Iron Head has a 30% chance to flinch. Double that with Aggravation 1 on Marnie's grid, and she is capable of flinch locking enemies, which is especially handy for Legendary Gauntlet. Unfortunately, every unit in possession of this move has DPS issues, and Marnie is no exception. Although she can correct her damage with power posture. But ultimately, Marnie falls under the same boat as Mask Royal and Champion Iris. Good utility with a strong nuke, but the output is average, so Marnie needs partners to compensate. Lastly, Marnie's trainer move is Kaylin's trainer move with a fresh coat of paint. +2 attack with +1 defenses. It's underwhelming. The defenses help Marnie tank sync damage, but she wants a partner who offers attack and crit buffs. Specifically Sonia and Hop. The former for Gauge, the latter for Theme Skill and Steel Zone Synergy. Team Sharp Entry also corrects bad RNG if they fail to proc their move point refresh. So far, I have nothing but praise for Marnie. She's really good. But now we can enter a dangerous territory, and that's talking about her issues. My greatest reservation about Marnie is her ability to create gauge. As a zone setter, Marnie suffers from a distinct issue where she lacks move freebies. Marnie would prefer spamming Ironhead after she's done debuffing with Growl. However, naturally, she cannot improve gauge outside of metallic acceleration too. We didn't feel this issue with Lucas and Renegade Cynthia to an extent, because their kits were built with dual strike in mind. This is aggravated by the fact that relative to the other zones, steel types are horrendously slow. Between Kimono Grimsley, Steven, and Raihan, they need a lot of speed support to compensate already. If Marnie is the party's sole gauge generator, she needs Speedy Entry 2 as a lucky skill for +4 speed post-mega. Marnie just doesn't dual strike very well, and this is especially noticeable with the 4-bar option in Champion Stadium. Like, dual striking with Seishian is not easy either, because Behemoth Blade is a 4-bar move. So, from experience, I recommend pairing Marnie with gauge batteries. People like Kiawe, Event Boxy, Ingo, or Sonia. Now, with all this knowledge behind us, let's backtrack to what Steel Zone changes for Steel types. Remember what I told you about Iron Head kind of blowing? Well, a lot of Steel types use Iron Head. Unless we are talking Raihan, Steel type damage sources are weaker comparatively speaking. The first Steel Zone beneficiary that comes to mind is Steven. Steel Zone gives him a well-deserved damage bonus, but his nuke still sits below Sinasur Red and Giovanni. And Metagross's DPS remains average. Under Steel Zone, Metagross hits slightly lower than Hala outside of Hail. As for Raihan, Surging Sun 3 Steel Beam under Steel Zone hits about as hard as Leon, which is a high benchmark. But Raihan is best team compositions carry Ingo, so is it really more practical than just slapping Emmed instead? Hop is much better with Marnie at least. Team Sharp Entry fixes his buff RNG, and need I remind you, Samacenta does unironically good damage for a support. I have been advertising that since Hop's introduction. With a 1-5 Marnie, Hop is a free win for free-to-play Steel Week stages. Then there is Kimono Grimsley. He already brutalizes stages with Metal Burst, and he doesn't need the Steel Zone boost. If anything, Grimsley has Singnuk contention with Marnie, but he appreciates Enfeeble for his multipliers. Lastly, there is Gloria. I talked about this earlier, but she is the single biggest winner of Palentine's Marnie. Marnie gives Gloria Theme Skills, Enfeeble, and Steel Zone. With those, Gloria is Pre-Sync Behemoth Blade has similar potency to Lear's Hyperspace Hole under Psychic Terrain. If you are a Gloria stan, don't miss out on Marnie. Gloria's viability changes completely thanks to her. Now, another thing 1-5 Marnie lets you do is Singnuk much more easily if you already invested in Steel-type strikers. 6-star EX Steven, Raihan, and post-sync Gloria can delete off-type stages in Champion Stadium under Steel Zone. I think Marnie is amazing, but I wouldn't call her a must pull. I have very high standards for granting that title. The deal is that Steel types don't propel hard enough through Steel Zone. It's more like the conjunction of Marnie with a very good support fixes Steel types. Marnie on her own doesn't carry the archetype. 1-5 Marnie is not anywhere near as impactful as 1-5 Lucas, but I would put her in the same category as Custom Diantha. At 1-5, pretty good. At 6-star EX 3-5, a monster, and you will not regret the investment. 1-5 Marnie has Trainer Move Point Refresh too, but Marnie typically demands offensive support, so she never goes for the refresh. Sun Shelter also prevents Sandstorm chip when played alongside Ingo. 2-5 has Endurance to help against random AoE crits. Ironhead Aggravation 1 and MGR3 make Marnie significantly more consistent at flinch-locking legendary gauntlets. Backed by Power Posture, Marnie's DPS is respectable under Steel Zone. Steel Wish Critical Eye 1 buffs Marnie's crit, so she can maximize the stat after another crit buff from Team Sharp entry post-Mega. This style widens Marnie's support roster. You could pair her with Lily or Rosanta, for example. Metallic Acceleration 2 is very important for Marnie. The more gauge you have, the more moves you can afford to spam. If you don't mind cutting down Marnie's offense a little, she also has good utility with Speedy Entry 2 as a lucky skill, which doubles upon Mega Evolution. The Growl MGR tiles are cute, but once all enemies reach -6 attack, Growl fails and you cannot proc the MGRs anymore. Finally, the Sinking Tiles and Super Sinker give a stronger incentive to sync with Marnie. Marnie's base sync is above average because Enfeeble improves it a lot, but her sync fails to impress until 3-5. Here we have Metallic Surge 5, which overlaps with Marnie's innate tech multiplier, and pecking order scales off of attack debuffs. With Growl Mind Afflictor 9, Marnie can drop the enemy team down to -6 attack in 2 turns, and have a turn to spare to cast the Steel Zone. 6-star EX 3-5 Palentine's Marnie is capable of erasing off-type Centermon's Fierce Sync with minimal setup. So let's go a little more in depth on Marnie's Nook. With just a couple Sinking Tiles, Marnie has similar potency to Champion Iris. With 4 tiles, -6 attack and -6 defense, Marnie outnukes Lear. Measuring Marnie's Nook is tricky, because it depends on whether you bring auxiliary defense debuffs, and whether the enemy used a random X defense all. Case in point, Enfeeble improves Marnie's output by a significant margin. Then we have Steelwish NPR2, which is par for the course. Enfeeble 1 applies an extra defense debuff in conjunction with Marnie's innate Enfeeble 2. So that'll be -6 defense post-Mega. That mass of debuffs makes endgame very easy after Marnie deletes a Centermon. Headstart 1 enables sync acceleration strategies. In particular, this pairs really well with, once again, Gloria and Seishan. Gloria also has Headstart 1 on her grid, and her trainer move drops the sync countdown. So you combine Marnie and Gloria's Headstarts to shave off a round of combat. Likewise, Raihan also has innate Headstart 1, so you can pivot off that. Fierce Entry 2 allows Marnie to buff attack upon entry, but the problem is that this tile is too far away to reasonably accommodate on any practical grid. Lastly, Ironhead Super Duper Effective 3 gives Marnie an on-type multiplier. Now, while Marnie has a lot of options on her grid, she is limited by her Nook. My general recommendation is always grabbing Metallic Acceleration 2 and go from there. The standard Marnie grid looks like this. You want sync multipliers and sinking tiles. Growl Might Afflictor 9 helps maximize pecking order with Marnie's team slot alone, while Power Posture gives Marnie serviceable off-type DPS. If you want big PP numbers, Marnie can afford all her sinking tiles. Pair her with Mask Royal plus Hop, and you can easily complete her Nook. But you lose Growl, Might Afflictor, and Power Posture. Marnie's Nook is potent enough, so I don't think it's worth sacrificing global utility just for a funnier screenshot. If you don't care about the utility, I still recommend Ironhead Aggravation 1 over the full Nook. The 60% chance to flinch is incredible. The only other Marnie mode I feel comfortable suggesting encompasses Enfeeble and Headstart 1, specifically to assist Gloria. Marnie can also play for okay DPS if you're nooking with a 6-star EX Striker, but if you have a 3-5 Marnie, wasting her Nook is a shame. So, Marnie is amazing, but if you have to skip her, don't sweat it. Steel types aren't a defining force in the metagame. We have been fine without Steel Zone, and we will continue to be fine without it. Up next, we have Node Melony and Vanilluxe, seasonal ice type support. DNA still really wants you to play Hail. I talked so much about Hail back in December. The gist of it is that Hail abusers typically have stronger modes to employ besides Hail. So really, DNA can spam as many Hail supports as they want, but what Hail really needs is somebody like Raihan, whom a weather mode is greatly beneficial. Hail right now has Holiday Leon with Invigorating Hail 1, like whatever dude, he can live without that. And Hail strikers like Price, Summer Steven, and even Lusamine to an extent are underwhelming. Now, does that mean B is bad? Not one bit. She is a very good support. I have her at 6-star EX 3-5 and can offer insight on her capabilities. So, I'll be quick about this. B needs the 6-star EX 3-5. There are a couple reasons for this. B's full grid has Team Sharp Entry 1, which she needs to facilitate the setup of other strikers. Second, her full grid has Hailbringer. When B sinks, she can summon Hail. Added to that, her innate Cold Front, which summons Hail upon entry, and V has permanent weather control. This offers the Hail archetype a specific perk where you can use a 6-star EX support buff without the need for a direct Hail setter, where usually you need 6-star EX Rosanta plus Candice or Holiday Nessa to accomplish that. And this is amazing because Hail modes are primarily DPS based. Now, 1-5E is in crude terms, Elio with Cold Front. B's trainer move buffs plus 4 attack and special attack for the party. Furthermore, when the weather is Hail, B's trainer move grants a physical move up next buff to all partners. B favors physical offense. In an ideal universe, V would play for her trainer move Point Refresh to maximize the party's offense and continuously provide physical move up next asteroids. But the reality is that we are dealing with a Point Refresh 2 with a single use, and we cannot rely on that. The real reason V is comparable to Elio is because Vanilluxe has Astonish. Astonish is amazing in this game. It's a 1-bar spam with a 30% chance to flinch. V is a rare support who can stagger enemies to void turns and prevent damage. Add Aggravation 1 on her grid and she cheeses Legendary Gauntlet. V also enables Harry and Flinch Heater no problem. While V provides immediate offense, I have qualms with her gauge generation. B has Hasty Hail 3 on her full grid, but it means Lidl without speed buffs. This is detrimental when the skill's intention is enabling dual strike. I think Speedy Entry 2 is a very good lucky skill on B. B with plus 2 speed and Hasty Hail 3 is barely enough for consistent gauge, without having to resort to something excessive such as Rosanta. B also has Icicle Spear. It's too weak to contribute in battle, so you can ignore it. Then we have this new passive at B's disposal, Hail and Hearty. It's an equivalent to Ingo's Sedimentary. When the weather is Hail, V gains a significant defensive boost. Vanilluxe has good bulk already. With Hail and Hearty, Vanilluxe is a defensive monster at 6-star EX, because Bea's Full Grid also enables Vanilluxe to raise its defenses. Coupled with a Cold Front, it's very hard to get through Vanilluxe. But you see, 1-5B only summons Hail at the start of a fight. So either you raise her to 3-5 for Hailbringer or slot a Hail Setter. It's not like Ingo where he casts Sandstorm on command to activate Sedimentary. Hence how universal his utility is. His passives work regardless of whether his partners can summon Sand or not. Bea's Hail is more conditional. She's not particularly synergistic outside of Hail abusers. And without the Hail and Hearty, she fucking dies. So, lastly, Snow Shelter is also a given. It'd be hilarious if B didn't have that. If you want to pull B and settle for 1-5, she is really handy for Legendary Gauntlet because she can flinch lock opponents and has Potion. In particular, V counters Moltres, an infamous Legendary Arena due to its difficulty. A properly invested V enables hyper offense, but her gauge remains iffy. That's B's greatest flaw. If she had a team speedy entry, just anything to apply direct speed buffs, I wouldn't hesitate to tell you she's busted. But the reality is that V doesn't maximize crit and doesn't generate gauge, which drops her value as a one-size-fits-all support. So either you go for 1-5B or go balls to the wall full grid, full investment. So let's jump right to it. The full grid has Skyla is potion efficiency, and as you'll know, Skyla is borderline unkillable with some decent RNG. Here, B also has all her Astonish tools. Between Aggravation 1 and MGR 9, she can keep the enemy field under control. Astonish Flag Bearer 2 is cute, but B already buffs +4 attack, and most physical strikers can top that off already. I guess it helps in Battle Villa, but I would rather use Sawyer, who can Omnibuff and flinch with Dark Pulse. Team Sharp Entry 1 is such a crucial tile in Champion Stadium contexts. It allows V to shave off a turn of setup for her partners. And the thing is that +1 crit is enough for Hail abusers. Holiday, Leon, and Hala have a Dire Hit Plus. Nessa has Sharp Entry or can spend a couple turns for +2 crit. While Summon Steven maximizes crit in one trainer move under Hail, so he doesn't even need a Team Sharp Entry. B just completes their setup. Something I learned after recording this is that Sharp Entry B is amazing with Kiawe. Kiawe naturally completes B's buffs with +2 attack, special attack, and crit. Together, they maximize the offensive stats of any striker regardless of spectrum, including mixed strikers. B takes care of tanking and flinches, while Kiawe manages potions, gauge, and debuffs the enemy. I made Thornton work with them, so just wanted to let you know about that particular core. Snow Sentinel 9 buffs V's defense and special defense after performing an attack during Hail. With +2 defensive buffs, V is tankier than Ingo. And I think I have done enough Ingo showcases to demonstrate that he can survive ridiculous amounts of damage. So this style is amazing. The only problem is that Snow Sentinel ramps up B's own defenses. It's selfish. Unbending, Stalwart, and Vigilance are standard defensive lucky skills. And down this corner, B has her Hail stuff. Hailbringer summons Hail upon sync. Healing Hail 2 restores a massive 12% of maximum HP per attack under Hail. With this, V doesn't even have to use Potion. And Hasty Hail 3 is V's only means of generating gauge. Now, for as much as I was drilling V's incapacity to buff speed, if you partner her with a striker who can raise speed, Hasty Hail 3 makes the gauge skyrocket. So, I would like you to pay attention to something. These tiles are very expensive. Let me give you an example. Okay, I want Astonish, Aggravation 1, MGR 9, and the Hail passives. I am 1 point short. V's entire grid is like this. You will always be 1 point short of crucial passives. It's really annoying. And then there is the fact that this grid is divided by sectors. You want better potions, you go to this corner. You want better flinch, you detour to this corner. It's really hard to customize B. Generally speaking, she cannot afford her potion tiles because her other modes have better value. And since V spams flinch, she's not too concerned about enemy damage anyway. 6-star EX V should do something like this. Team Sharp Entry, Hailbringer, and Hasty Hail 3 are compulsory for V to be a better Hail support. Snow Sentinel makes Vanilluxe insanely tanky by itself. It's a great passive in general. If you want V to play as a flinch bot, she wants Astonish Aggravation 1 for the 60% chance to flinch. The MGR 9 helps with the gauge, and you adjust the rest depending on the energy you have left. Now, remember that you don't have to play B in a pure Hail team composition. She has good potions and can consistently stagger enemies with Astonish. B acts like an alternate version of BP Morty with offensive buffs, so she works well in that sense. B is really good, don't get me wrong, but she's not brainless enough where I would suggest a new player should pull her. B best manages a specific playstyle, and she suffers as a result. Now for the exciting part. Up next, we have Signasus Cyrus and Darkrai, Dark Pokéfair tech. Let's cut to the chase. As you would expect, Darkrai possesses Dark Void. Before we even get to Dark Wish, I want to spend some time talking about Dark Void, because I think it's been underestimated. Dark Void is an AoE status move that puts every enemy to sleep. Sleep is busted. I avoid using sleep because I think it's super cheap. If you have a simple understanding of the turn sequence, you can use sleep to reliably shoot down enemies so they kneel at your mercy. An enemy incapable of attacking might as well be dead. Sleep is different from freeze and flinch because it's much more reliable. Dark Void here has 80% accuracy. You can easily fix that with a couple accuracy buffs, which Cyrus can provide, by the way, or with Troublemaker 1 as a lucky skill. Troublemaker 1 doubles the hit rate of status moves, so Dark Void is completely consistent with that as long as the target has neutral evasion. Now, one thing is spamming sleep, hoping it lands as an enemy wakes up, and another is playing sleep correctly. I have done tutorials on sleep chaining in the past, but honestly, I don't feel I understand sleep well enough. At least not to the caliber of players such as CX or Fue Boomer. Like, spread sleep cycles need to pay real careful attention to each individual sleep icon on the battlefield, and the innate sleep resistance of the enemy, and whether you can chain sleep with auxiliary passives such as MGR9. I am not going to dwell too much on the technicalities of it. What I am trying to say is there is no tool more powerful in this game than well-played sleep. It chases virtually all content. AoE sleep is less effective for extreme battles because you waste sleep on the sides and activate resilience, but my point is that the potency of sleep is derived from the skill of the player. I have seen people say, oh, Palentine's Marnie is the best unit in this batch. That's up for debate. But Cyrus here has access to what I believe is the best status in the game. Dark Void alone propels Cyrus's value. Now, Dark Wish offers a zone for dark types. You should know the drill by now. Cyrus opens a door to a new archetype. Cyrus himself takes good advantage of Dark Zone. With an offensive build, Cyrus has a similar DPS to Signature Red Under Sun, which is the golden standard for strikers. But Dark Dual Strike is where it's at. You want a Dark Striker to attack under Dark Zone, while Cyrus crowd controls enemies with Dark Void. For example, Furbert just became a monster thanks to Cyrus. His Haymaker Nuke matches Giovanni without Smarty Pants. Karen and Houndoom also jump to relevancy again thanks to Cyrus. He staggers all enemies so Karen can complete her setup, and he activates Dirty Fighting for Karen a la Serena. Plus the Dark Zone boost, Karen's DPS is respectable. Sync pairs like Sydney and Mask Royal don't benefit nearly as much from Dark Zone because their nukes already delete center and they are low DPS units. Dark Zone makes their nukes easier to use off-type, I suppose. What's more interesting are units with Dark-type coverage. Like, do you remember how stupid OG Marnie's power trip is? Now, picture that under Dark Zone. Nessa's Dark Zone Yolok is super legit to handle Dark Weak stages. And Lysander can play for a much stronger Harry 2 Dark Pulse if Cyrus fancies his own Dark Pulse aggravation. Dark Zone helps a lot of sync pairs, similar to how Palentine's Marnie fixes Gloria. Let's go over Cyrus' skill before I lose my mind. Cyrus has excellent stats, somewhat reminiscent of Renegade Cynthia, but even better. His special attack stat is great, he can tank when needed, and this speed stat is phenomenal. When given speed support, Cyrus becomes a gauge battery. We already covered Dark Void and Dark Wish. Both moves are very potent in their own right. But then we have Dark Pulse, as Cyrus is only offense. I would be a hypocrite if I didn't call this out. This has a 20% chance to flinch, which is irrelevant, because if you mean to stagger an enemy, Cyrus has a Dark Void, which is straight up better. Furthermore, sleep overrides flinch. They cannot coexist with one another. The problem here is that Dark Pulse is on the lower end of trivial moves, and I criticize Palentine's Marnie for that. The difference with Cyrus is that he has a shitload of multipliers to fix it. If we look at his full grid, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 150% multipliers to bump Dark Pulse. Realistically, it's only 130%, but compare that to Marnie's conditional 60% multipliers. Even accounting for Enfeeble, it's night and day. Cyrus is better at doing damage. And given the opportunity, he can afford to run the multipliers. Now, Cyrus' trigger move is okay. It buffs +2 special attack, +1 crit, and +1 accuracy. Cyrus fixes his offense and Dark Void hit rate by himself. Cyrus technically has offensive autonomy, but in order to get there, you have to spend 3 turns and you have to rely on a move point refresh too. And Cyrus won't be using Dark Void and Dark Wish if he busies himself with that. This is Cyrus' first flaw. He needs offensive support. Cyrus is already trying to do a lot of things at once, which happens to be Cyrus' second flaw. Cyrus has a lot of broken tools at his disposal, but he cannot multitask. Remember what I mentioned about Cyrus' very impressive DPS that matches Signature Red? Well, that type of build needs a sleep partner. Cyrus wants to spam Dark Void, but at the same time he also wants to click Dark Pulse, and he also wants to use his trainer move, and he also wants to use Dark Zone. I think it's the first time I see a unit with this level of busy work. Cyrus doesn't have enough time to do everything he wants to do. Cyrus can be the centerpiece of your strategy, but his partners need to lift the pressure off his shoulders. Otherwise, Cyrus is perfectly functional as a pure Dark Void bot to sleep lock enemies. And when given the opportunity, he casts Dark Zone to enable a Dark type striker. Anyway, Cyrus' tech multiplier is boosted by Dark Zone, simple and easy. Cyrus has Sync Snooze, it's similar to Summer Lyra's Clock Out. After using a sync move, Cyrus puts all enemies to sleep, which gives him further sleep lock insurance. Bad Break 9 debuffs any stat at random except for crit when Darkrai uses Dark Void. Cyrus not only stops enemies from attacking, he globally debuffs them. Note here, the description says it debuffs when you use a status move. It doesn't say you have to apply sleep successfully. Maybe you can just spam Dark Void even if all enemies are asleep. I am not sure, we will have to wait and see. In any case, Bad Break is janky. I would rather click Dark Pulse than attempt the debuffs. Furthermore, Cyrus has Power Play on his grid. This multiplier finally has a name. The more you debuff stats, the better the nuke, just like Champion Iris and Anniversary N. But Cyrus undeniably has issues setting up a Power Play. Bad Break is slow ramping, so Cyrus needs a debuff partner to reasonably set this up. Unfortunately, Classic Alessa doesn't work here. Shock Factor 9 depends on the enemy being paralyzed to proc, and that would prohibit Cyrus from using Dark Void. Generally speaking, Power Play is not realistic for Cyrus. He is better off focusing on his innate nuke. Lastly, Cyrus has this new passive called Shared Nightmare. The description is vague. It says it deals additional damage to all asleep enemies when the user casts a special dark move. What does additional damage mean? Is it Poison Recoil tier? Is it Sandstorm tier? Is it Extend Range for Dark Pulse? For now, we can only cross our arms and wait for Shared Nightmare to drop. It just doesn't have a precedent, so we are better off being conservative and assume the damage Shared Nightmare does is minimal. Regardless, Cyrus is obscene. He only has 2 issues. He needs offense and engage support, but he has it all. Cyrus has the best status in the game, but AoE. He can support his partners through a field effect. He has amazing DPS. His delete button is decent, but below average. Cyrus' offensive applications don't even have to use Good Nightmare. He still chunks with Umbral Power and Critical Strike too. I cannot compliment Cyrus enough. It's been a while since a tech has been this oppressive. If you pull Cyrus just for 1-5, he can cheese any Champion Stadium stage and most legendary arenas via Sleep Block. 1-5 Cyrus has nothing useful, the usual. 2-5 sees some fun stuff. Grand Entry 2 and Pinpoint Entry 1 alleviate Cyrus' buffing issues. You might as well grab them since they are available. Do note that Pinpoint Entry 1 is not enough to fix Dark Void accuracy. Cyrus needs +2 accuracy for that. Generally speaking, Troublemaker 1 is Cyrus' most consistent lucky skill anyway. I don't think Critical Strike 2 is worth worrying about accuracy, but that might just be how I prefer playing sleepers. Umbral Acceleration 2 and Dark Void Fast Track 4 are Cyrus' means of generating gauge. Do note Fast Track 4 only bumps up Cyrus' own speed. Sleep Block strategies require a ton of gauge, more than usual. You are spamming moves constantly because the enemies are not using theirs, so you need even more gauge to make up for it. Cyrus also gets his trainer move point refresh to here, but I don't like this. I don't like it if Cyrus has to buff at all to begin with. Dark Pulse Aggravation 1 is whatever when Dark Void is superior for staggering enemies, but this has particularly good synergy with Harry to Lysander. 3-5 has the multipliers. Super Preparation 1 will never proc, so don't bother. Power Play is good, don't get me wrong, but Cyrus is too slow at ramping this up. Even with the additional Bad Break 1 tile, it's just a 20% proc, so it's not helping. Okay, how can we make this work? I have to bring Custom Jasmine and Getsis, I guess. Because if you bring Champion Iris as tiered, she scales harder with the defense debuffs. Power Play is just not practical. If you want to run Striker Cyrus, just grab the Sinking Tiles and Dark Pulse multipliers, and he nukes very well anyway. Now, Cyrus has 2 good Nightmare tiles. One is specifically tied to Dark Pulse, while the other is free, which is strange. I can only assume it's to make a distinction for Shared Nightmare, but we just don't know how it works yet. Then we got Umbral Power 3, a multiplier derived from Dark Zone, and Dark Pulse Critical Strike 2 requires no explanation. If you force me to make a default Cyrus grid, I will run something like this. But without enough information on Bad Break and Shared Nightmare, it's difficult for me to make a proper assessment. Broadly speaking, however, I don't think Power Play is worth it. You are better off running Dark Pulse multipliers with Umbral Acceleration 2 for gauge. If you really want Cyrus to do big PP damage, then you go for Power Play and bring a debuff partner as tiered. Cyrus' next mode is DPS based. Here, Cyrus wants Serena as a partner, so she can put all enemies to sleep for him. And he needs AoE sleep because Shared Nightmare activates on all asleep enemies. Maybe Shared Nightmare will be trash and you can bring a single target sleep instead. Or maybe it's extend range for Dark Pulse and DPS Cyrus is borked. We don't know, but this is the most damage Cyrus can realistically pump. That said, DPS Cyrus without good Nightmare is serviceable. He's got better DPS than Palentine's Marnie. If you just don't like using sleep, you can run Cyrus as a traditional dual strike zone setter. Lastly, if you are running Cyrus as a pure sleep bot, he just wants Dark Void Fast Track 4 and MGR 4 to assist with gauge. Likewise, Umbral Acceleration 2 helps spam more attacks. So, while I have my qualms with Cyrus, this guy is looking insanely powerful and he's not even a Master Fair. my opinion on him is subject to change until we see Shared Nightmare in action. Last but not least, we have Dawn and Cresselia, a Psychic-type Pokéfair support. Supports are in more demand than ever because of Legendary Gauntlet. Now, Dawn is a more defensively oriented support. She is quite tanky and does a good job of protecting the party. And she has tools to enable offense, but only partially. Dawn doesn't directly enable units. Think of her as Classic Red, sort of. She has buffs to help strikers, but either she has to be paired with auxiliary offensive support or a really self-sufficient striker. So, Flat Cresselia is about as tanky as Palentine's Bee, but that doesn't account for her buffs nor her passives. Dawn has a decent speed stat, but cannot generate gauge outside of a catalyzing recovery on her full grid. And her special attack stat is Dogshot, so don't expect Cresselia to do meaningful offensive contributions. Dawn has Confusion for a 1-bar spam. This is always great in a support. She's got Moonlight. DNA wanted to be fancy and not use Potion. Moonlight is different from Potion in that you can only target yourself with it, but it has a stronger recovery. It restores 50% of your maximum HP at default, but when the weather is sunny, this amount is buffed to 60%. But under any of the other 3 weather conditions, Moonlight gets nerfed down to 40% recovery. Don't focus on the side effect too much. 40% is the same as Potion, so it's whatever. If you pair Dawn alongside Maxi or a Solarize user, she gets a recovery bonus. What I don't like about Moonlight is that it's a Pokémon move on someone who is meant to tank. If Cresselia gets flinched or frozen by surprise, well, whoopsie, you cannot execute Moonlight, which is risky. Then we have Moonblast. It's an average 3-bar move, but it's got a 30% chance to debuff a special attack. Paired with Moonblast on a roll 1, Dawn can replicate Sycamore's niche of crowd controlling special damage, which is very useful in Legendary Gauntlet, specifically Latias. And lastly, the Trainer move. It's got a couple uses, and it buffs +2 crit and +2 defenses for the party. Dawn has a Dire Kiddle Plus with global defensive buffs, which is phenomenal. She facilitates setup for other strikers and filters damage, which makes it much easier to tank sync moves in more difficult content. The problem is that these buffs are accompanied by a huge penalty. This chops off 30% of Dawn's maximum HP. It's not like Lance's trainer move that cuts down current HP. It's always maximum. This would be a really busted trainer move if not for its balancing downside. If you turned on the half ally HP option in Champion Stadium, Cresselia just fucking dies. So how does the kid compensate? Cresselia's playstyle is based on intentionally dropping below 50% health. Dawn has a bunch of passives that proc when you reach that threshold. Fortified 3 is a sedimentary equivalent for when Dawn reaches yellow health. With Fortified 3 alone, she has similar bulk to Signature Blue. When you account Dawn's innate defensive buffs, she is a behemoth. With this passive, I promise you, Dawn will not be dying through anything except crits, which you can block with Vigilance as a lucky skill. So, I don't think there is a risk for spamming Dawn's trainer move per se, because Fortified 3 cushions the health range. And if Dawn is about to go down, you can very easily use Moonlight to repeat the cycle. But this also means Dawn only has one use of Moonlight in a practical sense. She has to spend one Moonlight MP fixing the HP she damages by herself like a dummy. Well, I have seen people exaggerate the risks of Dawn is a low health playstyle, but I have been playing power reserves and with the half ally HP option for so long. When you start doing it, it's not as bad as it seems like. Like, it'll be fine, trust me. Well, Dawn also has Team Brainstorm 9. When Cresselia uses Moonlight, Dawn gives the party a special damage up next buff. This is New Year Sabrina Dawn Ride, but I really wish this was also tied to her train move. With Moonlight alone, it's restrictive. So, I don't think Dawn necessarily enables dual strike unless her partners generate speed. Dawn does offer acceleration with catalyzing recovery. The idea here is that you cycle Trainer Move, Moonlight, and use Dawn is 6-star EX support buff and bomb the enemy team afterwards with some DPS builds. Dawn really wants to take a Fierce Sync because she is a new Sync pair whose Sync move has an alternate side effect, just like Sycamore and Leaf. When Dawn sinks, she recharges the move gauge. That's really good. She heals her partners by 20% of their maximum HP, and this amount improves depending on Dawn is sync level. 3-5 would restore 30%. The real issue here is that the recovery is not applied on Cresselia. Keep that in mind. This sync move also removes all status conditions and all interferences from the party, which is insanely useful in Legendary Gauntlet. And as a cherry on top, Dawn has innate sync damage guard. This applies damage guard next on Cresselia when Dawn syncs for the first time. This is really handy in hyper-offensive contexts, like when you use attack cap and power-up options in Champion Stadium. The lack of buffs in this sync move is sketchy, but it's very potent all the same. It's very good recovery. So, Dawn is good, especially when paired with potent special strikers like Signature Red, Alder, Palkia, just strikers who can buff special attack really fast. The idea is that Dawn is fast grid and special move up next make up for the turns a striker has to spend buffing. And her full grid mitigates that issue to a degree. I don't know what to think about Dawn. She's good, just not insane or anything. Her low HP playstyle makes her difficult to use for players who aren't experienced with health management. If you have never touched power reserves in your life, Cresselia is hard to chew. To make Dawn more palatable, it's better to say that she is a good tank with a good array of buffs. Just use Moonlight when you feel threatened. 1-5 has nothing too useful, just Confusion Aggravation 2 for a 30% chance to confuse and Moonblast MGR 3. I guess this is kinda handy for Yuxi. 2-5 has MGRs, and the first trace of Dawn is HP cut down utility. With Crisis Countdown, when Dawn reaches yellow health, she drops the sync countdown by 1. I have been toying around with sync acceleration a lot more now that Head Start 1 is a lock skill, and I love this perk. If you pair this with like Signature Lusamine or Signature Alessa, you shave off a whole turn of combat and hasten your first sync. But then we go to the full grid. Here, Dawn gets an additional Crisis Countdown tile, so she lowers the sync countdown by -2. And this turns Dawn into a sync accelerator. Pair her with a striker with a Head Start 1, say Raihan, and you cut down a turn. This is very potent and makes up for Dawn's lack in offense. In addition, she has Desperate Team Freebie 9. When Dawn reaches yellow health, she adds free move next to the party, and now she can enable Dual Strike. Because remember, when she sinks, she recharges the move gauge to enable a whole volley of attacks. A fully gridded Dawn gives you an early sink and free gauges, and I think this is her most potent mode in Champion Stadium. At 3-5, Dawn also has a training move all ramped at 1, so she's capable of buffing a special attack for the party. With these passives, this kid is much more convincing. Now I can call Dawn a really good support. Like, 1-5 Dawn is whatever, but 3-5 Dawn? She gains crucial tiles that allow her teammates to do more damage sooner, which is the name of the game these days. For the miscellaneous utility, Dawn also has Adrenaline 1 and Sync Regen to improve her 6-star EX. She also has Sync Heal Refill 1, which recharges a Moonlight move point when Dawn sinks for the first time. Endurance and Danger Damage Guard help Dawn manage obscene numbers. We're talking Extreme Battle of Region tier. Danger Damage Guard has a quirk to it in the half ally HP option in Champion Stadium. Dawn needs to enter the field at half green health rather than yellow health. The way you do that is by making sure her HP is +1 over her half HP rounded down. You can manage that with gears or theme skills. So, if you enter at green health, you can use Dawn's turn move, activate Danger Damage Guard, and then Moonlight, and be safe. The setup sounds bothersome, but what I am trying to say is that Dawn has tools to manage low health. You don't even need to measure enemy damage. Danger Damage Guard and Endurance are good safety nets. Lastly, Dawn also has Moonlight Master Healer 1 and Catalyzing Recovery, which is really useful in Legendary Gauntlet. Dawn can tank for any team and provide gauge acceleration to boot. So, this is a Dawn grid I like for Champion Stadium. You want all her Desperation tiles and all ramped at 1 for hyper offense. Dawn's ability to accelerate sync is very abusive. Maybe you can give Dawn Head Start 1 as a lucky skill, although she really wants a Bea Lance to guarantee her safety given her low HP playstyle. If you want to ensure Dawn never fucking dies, Endurance and Danger Damage Guard are good picks. As long as your striker manages +6 special attack without Dawn's help. If you don't care for Desperation passives, you can play Dawn as a more traditional buffer with Catalyzing Recovery and Adrenaline 1 to ensure your second sync move happens in 3 turns. Besides the Champion Stadium modes, Dawn is a better fit for prolonged encounters such as Legendary Gauntlet. I would suggest Sync Regen and Moonblast Honor Roll 1 in such cases. So, having inspected Dawn's kid closer, I think she's really good, but the caveat is that she needs 3-5. Her full grid solves a gigantic amount of the problems I have with her. She's a completely different unit, full investment. Dawn's biggest issue that always remains is her lack of speed buffs, and she doesn't play with Speedy Entry 2 as well as B. So you have to be careful in team building to get around that. Is Dawn top tier? I would disagree. She's more like close to top. Well then, we are finally done. I am not sure how unholy long this video is, but it shouldn't have taken as long for me to talk about these units as it did. DNA really needs to stop with its own units because they just make things more complicated for everybody. But well, thank you for watching. good luck on your pulls. Be on the lookout for the second part where I will be checking out Blue and Arcanine as well as the new grids. But with that, I will be taking my leave. Thank you for watching, take care, and I hope to see you another time.